So handling this no data case here was one thing I wanted to do. The other important concept I want to dive in is another form of error handling. Now, of course, here we are already handling errors by checking for the response status code. But with that, we're actually handling error status codes. So errors returned from the backend through the response. And this is a very important aspect of working with HTTP. But it's not the only thing that can go wrong. Because sending this request here could, for example, also go wrong because you maybe have no internet connection or anything like this. And in such a scenario, Dart and Flutter would actually throw an error. They would generate an error object and throw that error object with a mechanism that's built into Dart. You can throw an error with the throw keyword, and then here you can create such an exception object by using the exception constructor function, the exception class that's built into Dart, and give it a message like an error occurred. That's how you could manually throw an error. Now, you don't want to do that too often because that will actually crash your application if you're not handling it properly, though the error handling is the part into which we'll dive over the next minutes. But that's how you could throw an error. And as you see here, all this code now got grayed out because if you throw an error, no other code after throwing that error will be executed. Now here I don't want to throw my own error, but it's worth knowing that this feature exists and that you can generate such an error. But why would you do that? Well, because you might want to communicate that something serious happened, something that leads to all the other code that would normally execute thereafter being redundant, and therefore the app should handle such errors to get back to a state where it works properly again. And that's what we should do here when using GET or all these other HTTP related methods here. Because these methods actually will throw an error if something goes wrong with sending that request. Not if you get an error status code. That should be handled as we're doing it here. But you would, for example, get an error if you have no internet connection, or if you're, for example, using an invalid domain here, if I remove the .com. In such cases, this would also throw an error. And how can you then handle such an error? Well, that can be done with two other crucial keywords that are built into Dart: the try keyword and the catch keyword. Now, try takes a pair of curly braces after it, and you should put the code that could potentially fail into this try block. So between those curly braces that belong to try. Catch is then added after the closing curly brace of the try block, and catch, as the name suggests, catches any error that might have been thrown by the code between those try curly braces. You then get access to the error here by wrapping any variable name of your choice between parentheses and adding another pair of curly braces, opening and closing. So this error thing here is in the end a variable that's created automatically by Dart, and you can give it any name of your choice, whenever this code here, between those try curly braces, causes an error. And this is then simply this exception object, which I showed you before with throw. So this exception object, which you can create, that's the error you're getting here when catching such an exception. And this error object could contain useful information, like, for example, a more detailed error message. And you can then add your fallback code that should be executed when an error occurs here in this catch block. And thereafter, the app will resume in a normal way. Therefore, here I will actually wrap all this code where I transform the data, load the data, and so on with this try block. So I'll cut it and add it here instead of try, so that I try executing all this code. But if it should fail, we make it here into this catch block. And in there, I then also want to set my error state, as I do it here in case of an error response. But now I'll do it instead of catch. And here we can then say something went wrong, for example. And if we do that, And we now still have this broken URL, which, and that's important, broke because here I removed the domain. If I reload this, you see this error message. And without try catch, the app would have simply crashed or would have been put into some undesirable state. Now instead we're handling this error gracefully, and that's why you should consider adding error handling like this with try catch in addition to handling error responses. Now you might also want to do this when sending a request in new items. Here, to keep things a bit simpler and shorter, I'll only do it in load items, but being aware of try catch and of this way of handling errors is important. With that, I'll fix this error here and re-add the domain, but that's how you can use try catch for additional error handling.